Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, a Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to I did a DNA test, and turns out I'm 5.7% ... by Disguised Toast. This is a channel I am not familiar with at all. I did look him up quick on Google. I saw that he's Taiwanese, but his family had lived in Myanmar, and now they live in Canada, I guess. He's a gamer, streamer, YouTuber, I guess. But obviously Asian ancestry coming from Taiwan. You know, I don't think we're going to get a very nuanced breakdown with these tests. I don't know which one it's going to be. Pulling up the video instantly, the first screenshot looks like a 23andMe front page. So probably 23andMe. So we'll just have to see. But I think that's all I'm really going to say. Let's just jump on in.
We all know that I am a huge racist. The problem with being a racist is sometimes you don't know what race you are exactly, and you don't know which race to be racist to. And today we will solve that problem by reviewing my DNA test that I sent in 2 weeks ago. Got this package that had a little vial in it, and they said, send us your spit and we can tell you what your ancestry results are. Boy, that is exactly what a racist needs, because my biggest problem is worrying that I'm racist against my own. The best way to be not a racist is to know what race you are, and jokes about your own race and no one will say. But you can't say that about other races. So to avoid, you are allowed to be racist against your own race because no one will call you out.
You're going to be cutting out so much of this.
Social media has taught me. The product/website I'm using is 23andMe. I think it's one of the more popular mainstream ones. And honestly, what I should have done was 5 different websites to see if there's any discrepancies, but I was too lazy to do that. How do they...
I always find it funny that there's so many YouTubers that kind of think about doing that stuff, but then don't go in depth enough to like actually talk anything about it. They just really go, well, comparing this one to this one to this one to this one, they're all different, so they must all be wrong. But then you get, you know, you need nuance to be able to actually compare them all after taking them all. So might be better that he didn't.
I'm nervous that it's just gonna be all Asian. Zichai, that's my Chinese name. Move on, don't make fun of me. Your DNA suggests your ancestry is 93.7% Chinese, with ties to 3 other populations. Oh, wait, so now if people ask me if I'm Chinese or Taiwanese, do I just say Chinese now? But that means I have 6.3% of foreign blood in me. All right, let's view the report. You have a 99.8% East Asian and Indigenous American. So you are 93.7% Chinese, 0.4% Filipino, and 5.7% Korean? No! I mean, awesome. That's a joke. I love all Asian races.
See, not super nuanced, obviously, with just Chinese and Korean, but it'd be very interesting to see these results through one of the Asian-based DNA sites. So WeGene or 23andMe are the two that we often talk about on this channel, but those are the ones that give a more nuanced breakdown of things. So, you know, with Chinese, China's huge. China's a large country. I don't know how well these tests really can tell a lot of this stuff for the Asian communities. So, you know, you'd really want to look at the precision and recall numbers for 23andMe's Asian communities, which actually we can do that. So I pulled up the 23andMe white paper, which then shows us the precision and recall numbers of each population group that they're defining. So basically it's how well can they define that group. And basically, you know, precision is, you know, out of all of the people that they said were that, how many truly were of that ancestry, whereas recall is of all of the people that had that ancestry, how many actually got it. So the basic idea here is that by looking at these numbers, we can get an idea of if we're getting that reading, how confident are they in that reading? So looking down here, we do see that they're pretty confident with these readings. You know, Korean, they've got 96%, 99.6% recall. Chinese and Southeast Asia, the general reading is very high. And then for China, which I think that's what he got, Chinese and then Filipino and Austronesian. So with Philippines and Austronesian, Not quite as good, but then just for general China, it was pretty decent. So the results that he's looking at, yeah, I mean, they seem fairly confident based on the precision and recall that, yeah, it's very likely that he does have that sort of ancestry. But one thing to note is that there is no Taiwanese reading here. There's just these readings for East Asian. And so you can see how unnuanced the breakdowns are for 23andMe. So when I say nuanced, I just mean breaking it down much more regionally. And that's where 23andMe and WeGene would come in.
We detected traces of the following populations in your DNA.
We detected Central Asian DNA, 0.2%. Yeah. Oh, that's significant. That's going to change a lot.
Central Asian? I got 0.2% trace DNA from Kazakhstan? From Genghis Khan? Oh, that would make sense. I mean, I am from China, so Genghis Khan probably banged my great grandmother. Okay.
Honestly, it's very possible that he, along with most of everyone else in East Asia, descends from Genghis Khan in multiple ways, at least.
Is there more breakdown in the Chinese portion? We found the strongest evidence of your ancestry in the following 10 regions.
And so these regions that they're giving, this stuff is basically using the DNA matches. They look at what are the places that they say their family came from, because with 23andMe, they give you the option of saying the location for your maternal grandfather, maternal grandmother, paternal grandfather, and paternal grandmother, and then others. So people put that stuff in. They look at how many have whatever out of mainland China, and they see, okay, out of all of your relatives, Shandong is the number one that we see people, so you must have some sort of connection there. Doesn't necessarily mean ancestral connection, could actually just be cousin connection. You know, could just be that years and years and years ago, a sibling of one of his ancestors went to Shandong and then had a bunch of kids, and they had a bunch of kids, and now all of the people in Shandong descend from that ancestor, and so it just really looks like he has a lot of, ancestry in Shandong, but really what it is just, he has just a lot of cousins there, sort of thing. So with these lists, what you'll often see is you'll see some of the largest cities in that country or whatever that defined population group is. You know, you'll see the largest cities towards the top just because so many families have that general connection. So for, the US, it's very common to see New York probably, or like a very common one in the UK, people get London almost all the time. Greater London is like one of the number ones.
Wait, it's all Chinese. I don't have a single drop of Taiwanese blood? According to the DNA, I am most likely from Shandong, Guangdong.
Like I said, like we saw before, they don't define Taiwanese as a population group. They probably lump it in with the Chinese reading. Hence why the other I think one's Chinese-based and one's Japanese-based, but 23andMe and WeGene, those ones would give you a better breakdown, and those are the ones that may have a Taiwanese reading.
Dong, Shanghai. I'm going to use the Chinese pronunciation. Shandong, Guangdong, Shanghai, Zhejiang, Jiangsu, Henan, Fujian, Sichuan, Liaoning, Hunan. Oh, so what do I say if someone asks if I'm from Taiwan? I am from Taiwan, right? This video is gonna get super demonetized.
That's the funny thing. People see these admixtures and it's like, I know my family lived in Taiwan. What's going on? And it's like, well, yeah, of course they lived in Taiwan. These tests are far from perfect. And especially coming from an Asian ancestry, you're probably one of the people that's going to get the most unnuanced and kind of most basic readings out of most everybody. Even people with African ancestry probably get better breakdowns than people with Asian ancestry on 23andMe.
Well, here's the thing about my family. My mom was born in Korea, but just because she was born in Korea shouldn't introduce Korean blood. So the Korean blood was introduced earlier. And how do we know if this is North Korea or South Korea?
We wouldn't, because the DNA is so similar. Remember, DNA doesn't care about borders. Like you just said, just because she's born there doesn't mean all of a sudden she inherits DNA from Korea. just like all of a sudden, because Korea split in two and now is South Korea and North Korea, it does not mean that all of a sudden, nope, North Koreans now have a very different DNA than South Koreans. We can read that perfectly. So this is, I can already tell that's the way he's coming at this, is that very typical, I'm expecting this to go by every country in the world sort of thing, where it's not. And just like we discussed before, there are a lot of countries that they aren't defining, that just get lumped in with other generalized population groups, or just get pushed into these readings like Chinese, which probably encompasses a lot of stuff beyond just China, but they just define it as Chinese because that's the easiest thing.
Is it because when my mom was growing up in Korea, she ate a lot of kimchi?
Not quite. 5.7%, if we're assuming that this is coming from one ancestor and not just like, you have lots of distant Korean ancestry, because there probably is a lot of population correlation between Korea and China. Basically, people from China and people from Korea have gone back and forth for many, many, many thousands of years, having children with others from the different areas. And so there's a lot of various crossover with DNA from Korea to China. Now, obviously, my Asian ancestry knowledge is very, very low, and I don't quite know the common population flows. I know Korea and Japan have a very strong correlation to each other DNA-wise, but I imagine somewhat like Northwestern European sort of thing, them having so many communities that have had, thousands upon thousands of years of history. But anyway, at 5.7%, assuming that it was coming from just one ancestor, then we'd be looking at probably about a second great-grandparent. So the way to figure that out is you get 50% of your DNA from your parents, 25% from your grandparents, 12.5% from your great-grandparents, and then 6.25% from your second great-grandparents. Well, 6.25% is the closest to 5.7%. And when you inherit DNA, it's not that perfect split every time. You do get 50% from mom and 50% from dad, but then whatever you inherit from mom might not be a 50-50 split of her parents. So you might get 27% DNA from your grandfather and 23% from your grandmother. And then it also might be whatever DNA that you're inheriting might be very skewed of, if you have a big mixture of ancestry, you might get a lot more DNA from one side of your ancestry than the other, just because of the randomness of recombination. So because of that, we just correlate the 5.7% to the closest ancestral perfect breakdown, which would be the second great-grandparent at 6.5%. Also understanding that maybe he just inherited a lot of DNA from that side, so maybe it's a third great-grandparent. But to give an idea of how far back that would be, for most people my age that come from, I want to say, generations that are like 30 to 35 years between, basically, most of the parents are having the kid at somewhere between 30 to 35 in average, then you're usually looking at about the early 1800s to mid 1800s for a third great-grandparent when they were born. And then for a second great-grandparent, usually kind of mid 1800s or so for when they were born. Obviously can vary, something like that, but that gives you a general idea. So if you truly are having this Korean ancestry coming from one ancestor in your past, that's a recent ancestor, that ancestor would have been born about 200 years ago. So hopefully that gives a better idea, but let's continue.
Real talk, what most likely happened was my grandma from my mother's side. They were living in the part of China that had a lot of Korean immigrants, which is on the eastern coast. But then they went back to Korea, and that's why my mother was born in Korea. The reason why they went back to Korea is because, I'm not gonna name any countries, but a certain country decided to invade China and did some really not cool things in China while they were there. My grandmother was in that region, so they had to escape. My uncle was a child, and he was escaping with my grandma. And a bomb went off very close to him, and it deafened him in 1 year. But he made it to Korea.
Very, very interesting history there, and that is a good thing to understand with these DNA tests. As much as he's joking around, it does seem that kind of serious note, he does understand that there is that kind of back and forth sort of thing that may be causing this. So with a story like that, his mom coming from an area, in China that had common Korean ancestry, then it certainly makes sense that this 5.7% probably doesn't necessarily represent one recent ancestor as much as it represents multiple, somewhat more distant ancestors, but could still represent an ancestor that, was born sometime in the past 200 to 300 years or so.
That's where the 5.7 Korean blood came from. Most likely someone in Korea immigrated to China, met my great grandfather or great grandmother. They lived in an area of China that had a lot of Koreans and a lot of Chinese. And then they ended up going back to Korea, where they gave birth to my mother. Bada boom. It is not because my mom ate a lot of kimchi growing up. So my mother went to Taiwan, met my father, and had babies. I had 2 child, and then had an accident. That's why I'm here. Is there any other thing to review? Explore your Filipino...
I hope your reviews DNA matches.
No. What can I say about my Filipino heritage?
0.4% trace. It might not even really be true.
I'm short. That's all I got. Maybe that's why me and Ray get along, because we're both Filipino brothers and sisters. Let me see if there's other reports.
At best, I think you're going to be Filipino distant cousins.
Neanderthal ancestry. You have more Neanderthal DNA than 97% of the other customers? Huh? Wait, So, what? Are they calling me a caveman monkey?
It's really interesting because I always find that it seems like people with European ancestry have more of the Neanderthal DNA. I also am not very knowledgeable about like the whole Neanderthal DNA stuff, and I know people have asked me questions in different Reddit Q&A stuff that I do and all that, but I really don't know that much about this stuff because to me, I'm focused on the genealogy side of stuff.
What's maternal haplogroup? You descend from a long line of women that can be traced back to Eastern Africa 150,000 years ago. Wait, does that mean my ancestors are from Africa? Is that how...
Well, yeah, everyone's are. But matrilineally and patrilineally, when you're able to do these, the haplogroups, you're always going to get back to Africa. But with haplogroup L, I think that is kind of interesting because I think that's... I don't know how common that is amongst Asian population groups.
Oh, it works? Yeah, why are you all saying, oh no? What are you guys all knowing about? What do you think I'm going to do with this knowledge? Everyone's from Africa.
Oh, okay. Maternal haplogroup A. Paternal haplogroup NL665. So, maternal haplogroup being your mother's 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 mother and so on. Paternal being your father's 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 father and so on. All the way back to chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve. When you look at those, it can give you a really interesting idea of was there something going on in your ancestry, hundreds or thousands of years back? Because those percentages we see, that 93.7% Chinese and 5.7% Korean and all of that, those are generally good back to about 300 to 400 years, maybe 500 years, these autosomal DNA tests as they're called. Basically, the ancestors where you're inheriting large chunks of DNA. So, which usually goes about to your 4th or 5th great grandparents. And then once you start getting back further than 5th and 6th, you start to have so many ancestors that you're not inheriting all of the DNA from all of the ancestors in that generation. Basically kind of getting filtered out in a sense. So that's kind of why they usually say about 300 to 500 years, because usually with the autosomal DNA tests, 300 to 500 years, you can get an idea of, DNA from at least every ancestor from those generations sort of thing, about. So very, very generalized.
Very cool. And I can't wait to hold this over Lily. Yo.
Hi.
What up, my sister? How you doing? Lily, I always felt you and I were kind of like family.
Is this because you're 5.7% Korean?
That is exactly why,
Not because of our past experiences or friendships or all the turmoil we've been through together?
No. I mean, like, literal family. We're probably distantly related. Lily, either?
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite thing about being Korean?
I never really thought about that.
I'm new to this being Korean thing, so I'm gonna need some guidance. What do Koreans like to do?
I'm not
I have no clue
sure.
what's going on right now.
I don't really make decisions based on if I'm Korean or not, you know?
All right, well, that was an okay video. That was really long and a lot of stuff I'm probably going to cut out because it had absolutely nothing to actually do with the DNA test, really, other than him talking with his friends about it. Other streamers, I guess, that I'm not familiar with. But overall, not too terrible, you know, very generalized, basic results, obviously, with Asian ancestry. Like I've said a couple of times, it'd be really interesting to see 23 Ma Fong or Wei Jin for him and see what's the breakdown there, because it's much, much more nuanced. This video, I did notice, is 2 years old, so it is possible his results have updated since, and he may no longer have that 0.4%, and things may have changed a bit. So I'd also be curious about what those new results are, because I'd imagine they've probably tried to make things more nuanced as time has go on. It's just a question of how much better have they been able to do that. Otherwise, I don't think there's really much to say, but if you did enjoy this reaction and you want to see more, be sure to check out this one right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.